right, so how are we doing? Oh, all right. Yes, we are very close to the end of the first perek of this mimer. Um, four lines from the end. Line begins with Umevies Ankudo Lidei Hasaga. With me? I turn it on. All right. So we are now discussing and coming to, so to speak, the conclusion, explaining what das is. Chochma, Bina, v'das. So first we explained Chochma and Bina. Then there's a long discussion on das. And the principle of das is his kashrus, which means to delve in, to tie your mind to the thought that you are recognizing. And we discuss it from various angles, various levels. The important principle in Das, and we have seen already, we will still see more, that Das is really the most important, so to speak, part of seichel, of the mind. Because if a person can understand, but he does not have the das, then this understanding is both. Number one, it's not real, and number two, it has no effect. It's not real means essentially you could say it's hypothetical, academic. It's not something personal, not something that he himself relates to. And the most important part of understanding of seichel, again, as we know, we're not talking about mathematics. We're talking about seichel of the nefesh, seichel that defines right from wrong, good from bad, truth from falsehood. That seichel, the most important part of it is that it should give a person a recognition of these inyanim. And that happens through das. Even though the understanding itself is not in that. The understanding itself is Chochmah and Bina. But das is the guy that pushes you to say, okay, let's get it clear, because it's important to me. That's why it's called his kashrus, that which ties the person to the inyan that he understands.
Mm-hmm. I've heard some people tie the idea of instinct to das. Is that
No.
accurate?
No, it's not accurate. Instinct is altogether, generally speaking, the union of instinct is not even a seichelic thing. We're talking about seichel. And the principle of seichel means that you actually know it, that you have an instinct. You know it with a certainty and a clarity, just as something that you see with your physical eyes, or something that you touch with your physical hands. Those mean knowledge. And it's equally as real to you as that which you see. That's seichel. This is why we say that it is absolutely possible for a person to do, say, Torah mitzvah, to do Avodas Hashem, without any ulterior motive. I mean, this is a high madrege, but it's still possible. Without ulterior motive. Ulterior motive means without any personal reason, personal gain, because it is the truth. This is in fact how the Rambam describes it. Rambam says that a chocham, that's the term in the Rambam, of a tzaddik or a real person is called a chocham. As a chocham, he does Torah mitzvahs, and that was Avodas Hashem, not for any explanation, for any reason, not even for Olam Haba, not even in order to get reward in Olam Haba. But he does it because Ho'emes mipnei shehu emes. He recognizes the truth because it is the truth. That's possible only because of Das. Because Das makes that which you understand you. And if the truth, then you become the truth. Not like you and what you understand are two separate things. Then you have to make a separate decision to do it. Right, we'll dig a little more. I said we have 4 lines from the end of this paragraph. The last word is the 5th line, so it's 4 full lines. V'zehu, okay, the latter half of the line. V'zehu. And this is what is meant. What we said, what we explained here is zehu. This is what is meant when we said shahadas mechaber chochma ubina. That das connects chochma with bina. The Rebbe explained that das has come to function on 2 different levels, 2 different times. First, it is when you have it in Chochmah, to connect Chochmah to Bina. In other words, to allow, to give Bina a way, how to get to the Chochmah and to understand it. That's through Das. And that is, it's called Hischaber, Mechaber Chochmah Bina, al dei hiskashrus. As al-dei his kashrus, through the process of his kashrus, of connecting. Shenichnas lipnimius va'amitis hanakuda, where he enters with his mind to the internal and the truth aspects of the nakuda. The nakuda is called the chochmah. The nakuda, the idea that he has in his mind. He enters internally to it. Umagbil oisa, and then he magbil. The word magbil means he limits it. It doesn't mean to say limited in a common sense of what the limited means. He gives it a definition. Doesn't just say, oh, this is true. He has an exact definition. This is true. Magbilos. Ba'oifim. And so that shetove bahasogo, so that this nekuda will then be able to be brought down into full comprehension, k'moi shehila mitos, as this nekuda is in truth. What is the truth of this nekuda? What is the truth of this concept? Like when we say a person understands, and when he has the nekuda, has the sense that he recognizes in his chokhmah that the world was created by Hashem. And then he wants to elaborate on it. What does this mean? And like the Alter Rebbe explains, you've all learned this, but it all comes from the same Nekuda. The Alter Rebbe explains that the Nekuda, that we say that Hashem creates the world, means that not that Hashem created the world yesterday, or 5,000 years ago, and then it continues to exist. That is not correctly understanding that Nekuda, that concept, that Hashem created the world. The correct understanding of that Nekuda is that Hashem creates the world on a continuous basis, all the time. Because when we, do I have you with me? Do you follow me? When we recognize in our mind, if we truly recognize in our mind that Hashem, that the world is a creation, what do we recognize in this? What is it that makes us recognize it? And recognize that the world does not exist on its own. It's not a true presence, a true existence that exists on its own. It had to come from someplace. And if it had to come from someplace, then it has to come, and that we recognize right now. That means it has to come from someplace on a constant basis, all the time. This is the true Nakuda. If someone goes and has the idea of how to create the world, and then he says, okay, he created 5,000 years ago, and now it exists on its own, he misses the point. He's not interpreting, he hasn't entered, he hasn't concentrated. He hasn't gone into the Nakuda and connected himself to see what that really means. So this is where we have the Hadas. When you have the idea, and that's and say, okay, why do I say that? What does it mean? And then you start defining it. It's not just because understand. Let me finish. I hope I'm not losing you. Please stay with me. If you don't understand something else, it is possible to say this simple answer. Where does the world come from? Well, God created it. It's just, so to speak, a question and an answer. It doesn't tell you anything about the world. It doesn't define the world. Just a kind of a offhanded answer. And then you go on, so to speak, in the world, just as if you never knew about this, that God created the world, because the world remains the same. It's just an imaginary thing. If the world really, as far as you're concerned, exists, but you're asking a question, listen, Just like this watch is here. Somebody must have put it here. The world is here, and somebody must have put it here. But the watch, once it's put here, it continues to be. I don't have to continually put it here. So the world too. So then you miss the point completely. That's not the concept when we say God creates the world. And that's not the reason that we recognize in our minds, yes, indeed, God creates the world. Because what do we recognize in our mind when we say God created the world is because there is no basis and no reason for the world to exist altogether. And therefore, if this yesh me'ayin, if it exists, it's because Hashem makes it exist, forces it to be. So if we attend, so to speak, we pay attention, we are miskashe to that nakuda, then we can draw the proper conclusion, the proper explanations and hasaga from it. If we don't, then it's a totally meaningless thing, and we can create all kinds of different things in the hasaga.
Defining what it means is part of das, part of bina.
Defining what it means is bina. But das brings bina close to the chokhmah, so that bina will know what it's trying to define. Instead of just going off in its own corner and saying, okay, God created the world. Okay, let's see how that would probably work.
Doesn't that mean the limiting that occurs in bina?
I'm sorry?
Doesn't that mean the limiting of the idea occurs in bina?
No, the limiting of the idea, I said the word limiting, it's defining it, giving it a perspective, that occurs in das. What does it mean you're limiting the idea? Limiting the idea means, effectively, I really want to know what that means. That's called limiting the idea. In other words, if you give me an answer, and I go on to the next step, means it's just an answer to a question. The question is answered. As long as the question is answered, I don't care what the answer is. You know what I'm saying? That's what happens. I don't care what the answer itself is. I had a question, you got an answer, okay, I have no more problems. The point that I care what the answer is and what does it mean, that's das. This is
Why can't God create a world that, if let's say someone would say to you, well, what if God created a world that can exist on its own? Why can't God do that? He's God. He can do anything.
when we say, I understand your question, okay, and the question is not why that God created the world in the way He did. The question is this: let's take the example of this watch. You would not say that the watch fell down from the sky. Why couldn't it?
The reason why it couldn't.
What? It could. But you would not assume that would happen. So when you look at the watch, your mind tells you something else. It could happen, but that's not the way you see it. That's the question that we are looking over here. Not what could be. The question is, what do you see?
Well, I don't see God recreating the world.
You don't see God creating the world. True. That is because you did not delve into the idea and to figure out what is the world. The Rambam says, right in the beginning, we mentioned it many times, that the foundation, the basis of all seichel is to know that there's a first being that created everything.
Okay, I didn't deny that when I asked the question.
If you did not deny that when it's question, you still ask a question, that means that you are, when you say that I don't see God creating the world, that means that you are not looking at the world with your seichel. Because the basis of seichel is to know that there is a first being who created the world.
I said God created it, but then that's it. Why couldn't He create
No,
it?
wait a second. Okay. Oh, so you do see that God created the world. How do you know?
I didn't say
How do you know it?
Let's say, I'm saying if someone comes up to you in the street, we're doing the time, and I say, well, God recreates the world every second. He says, okay, why? Why
Yeah,
can't
well,
He
that's
just
not
create a world and it's just there? Why does
right.
He have
No. I'm not talking about somebody in
For me to
administration.
understand and answer this question, I need to understand.
No. The answer. You answered. Right now, we're not talking about answering the question in the street.
No,
We're talking
for
about
me as
answering the
well, I
question
wanna
to
truly
ourselves.
if I can't answer the question, that means I don't truly understand it myself. So I
Okay.
want to know how to understand this.
Okay, so the question that we're asking is us asking questions to ourselves, not in the street. And that means the words in the Rambam mean that if I think of the world not with my gut and with my midas or with my taste buds, but with my seichel, then it has to have a first being that creates it.
Well, I didn't deny that when I asked the question. I said someone created
No.
a first being
Okay,
that created.
one second. Why does it have to be? Why does it have to be that somebody creates it?
Well, a lot of people believe that God created the world.
Believe, I'm talking about believe, I'm talking about seichel.
Because
Of course you don't. Huh?
What came first? How to get there?
Right, really. Okay, one second. Seichel means the exact way that you interpret what you see, not what you believe about it. The exact way how you interpret what you see. Let's say this. Let's say God created the world and then let it flow. Let it flow. Does that then necessitate that the world has a purpose? It has to act in a certain way.
Maybe.
Does it necessitate or not? If you made it and let it. I made this watch. Okay? I made this watch and I sold it. Does that necessitate that whoever buys it uses it to know when Mincha time is? Or to know something about Christmas or something, Christmas? No, you could be using it for whatever reason.
If you create a maze and you stick a mouse in it, or you create a track and you stick a mouse in it, and it's just enough for him to go straight, then at the end he's going to get to the end. God can create a very complicated world where things have to work out a certain way and eventually they
That's
end up.
true, but I'm not talking about they have to work. I'm talking about is there a purpose? If the world runs on its own, then it doesn't necessarily have a purpose. You understand? The Rambam begins this Sefer, this is Sefer HaMitzvahs. He says, because there is a first being, that's why there is mitzvahs. That's why there is a certain way that you have to behave in the world. Otherwise, it makes no difference. Makes no difference. Apiseichel, it can make a difference for other reasons. You make food tasty because you like the taste, but that doesn't do with seichel. So, this Indian, see, this is it's a very difficult matter, but it's important that we adults here.
I don't want to throw you off.
You're not throwing me off.
I could go on for like.
No.
It's not clear, man.
One second.
Everyone else will do it.
Okay, no. Just try to understand what I'm saying to you rather than debate it. You understand? There is the seichel is the pshat. There's a person, like we discussed many times, a person has seichel, and seichel defines to him what it is that he sees. Okay, this is and in that seichel, as I said, the union of Breishis Borel Kim the Shemayim V'Zoretz is something which makes sense to a person's seichel. For some reason, it makes sense.
I agree.
Okay, the reason for that is not because of emunah. I'm talking about because of seeing what the world is.
You said voracious.
Yeah.
In the beginning.
Yeah.
Which didn't go off from what I asked.
The beginning of creation.
Second God created. You didn't say. It doesn't say every second God created.
Right. No. Breishis Borel Kim the Shemayim V'Zoretz is the beginning of creation. No, wait. So, and that makes sense. Okay. Now the question is, why does it make sense? Does it make sense? I have a world.
Because it's based on our seichel. We know that something that
How do you know?
has to go first. Because that's the way things work.
But it has to be created.
Well, where else is it?
They run one after the other.
I'm sure that happens too. Something has
Okay.
to put the first thing there.
All right. So therefore, I'm explaining to you. If you would think, that's why I'm asking you to think rather than just debate. That the reason that it makes sense is because the world, as such, demands that there be a creator, and we recognize in our seichel that the world is not just a blob of existence, and that it has a meaning and a purpose. That's connecting that if there is a meaning or a purpose, it has to have a creator. Without a creator, there's a meaning and purpose. Something happens by itself, there's no meaning and purpose.
But why every moment?
That's my question.
That follows as well. That follows well, because even if it were created, if it then exists on its own, it's the same as happening by itself.
Why? According to the laws of physicality, it can be existent.
Yeah, but no purpose. Then it runs on its own. Purpose is something else.
Like this, I can take something.
Okay,
and
one
there's a
second.
purpose. I want it to get over there, and I can push it, and it will go by itself.
All right. So let's end this debate now.
I'm not trying to debate.
I understand. But let's end it there. But I'm explaining to you that this, if you think into it a little deeper, you would come to this conclusion.
1.5.
Okay, so next time. But I just want to explain this in here, that this understanding, this recognition, if one connects to it fully, then Hasoga is also correct. If it does not connect to it fully, then the Hasoga could be all over the place. Like you say, I don't even see it that way. So I'm explaining to you the reason you don't see it, and that's what the Rebbe says, is because you did not, because we have to apply the das that connects the Hasoga to the Chochmah, to the Nekud. And that is really a whole avodah. And when it connects it, then the Hasoga comes according to the Chochmah. That's what he says. The Kunkamba Hasoga Kmeshi La Mitoso. La Mitoso, the way the truth of that Chochmah is. Otherwise, he would have Hasoga, and it can be all over the place. It could be completely perverted from the Nekud.
This is based, if you're going to tell to someone that the world is created by the Eibishter, and that it exists in a constant state of creation, and you're not, do you agree with it? You're going to think about, normally like you said before, you're asking what's the difference between an animal and a person. You're going to think about the concept, you're going to say, do you agree with it? They're going to say, yes, I agree with it. You're going to say, explain it to me. And they're going to sit there, and going through the process we spoke earlier, the thoughts are going to sit there and they're going to think about it, and they're going to go through the process, and when you ask to explain it to you how they have it now shaped in their mind, this doesn't necessarily state at all that they're going to have anything correct. I mean, they could be completely and totally off. You understand what I'm saying? Like, we're talking about now that if you have the Nakuda, and Nakuda is true, and the person connects it using the great Das, and they go through the process of being and everything.
If he connects to the Nakuda correctly, he is bound to have a correct Hasod.
How is it so?
Because the Nakuda is correct.
But is it impossible that a person in his own intellect he's not educated enough to?
Yeah, it could be that he doesn't have the means and the process to do it.
He didn't really connect it correctly. He never.
Could be, but I'm saying again, if he connects to it correctly, and once he fully connects into it, then he's bound to have it correct. Because it comes from that. You see, the Nakuda is Chochmah. Chochmah is the way the neshama sees it. That's correct. If he connects to that Nakuda, then it will be a correct Hasod.
But the neshama knows the reality as it is. So a person, if you give this system, just the same Nakuda, Hashem creates the world constantly from nothing to something, and you say, now I want you to think about it, and you say, I agree with this, it seems true to me, and then can you explain it to me? So the neshama already knows the truth of it. You don't have to
So
explain
now he has to reflect, what does that mean to me? Why does it seem true to me? Why does it really seem true to me? This is not a one-moment thing.
And inevitably, if you give him enough time to think about it and the tools, so to speak, that he's going to come
He is not going to come up with all the ramifications that the Alter Rebbe says. But it will make sense to him. Even if he doesn't come up with ramifications, but if you help him along, he says, yeah, that's what I mean. The Alter Rebbe in Tanya says that you're talking about people, ma'amini, b'nei ma'amini. That's what he says. People who believe and know the truth. And yet they came up with conclusions that are completely contrary to a movement. And he says, that's the Lashon. He says that they're blinded. They don't see the Nakuda that they see. So it's possible to have it in the Nakuda, but not bring it in Hasod. This is why it's necessary to connect to the Nakuda. First of all, it's necessary to get the Nakuda, to get the point, to get the Nakuda, not just in words, but in Seichel, in Chochmah, to recognize it. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about understanding.
I want it.
Okay.
That's why I'm doing Chakirah.
Right. No, Achira.
How am I supposed to get the answer if you can't do what he wants? Like, this is where I'm supposed to get my answer from.
If we were learning that in Bereshis Bara Elokim, then I would pursue it until we fully. But that's not what we're doing. This is only a mashal for the that we're learning. You understand? So I can't really. That would be take us away. Next time, we'll get to it. So this is one function of das. V'chein, and similarly, leyachar hasogo. After that, one has already obtained the hasogo. Inyan hadas who the inyan of das is shemiskashe v'nichnas b'pnimis o inyan that he connects and he enters b'pnimis o inyan inside of the inyan. In other words, it's not something that I know, but I'm standing out of it, but outside of it. But he actually enters internally to the inyan. Until he comes to the point of hargosh hazoinyan, of actually sensing, feeling the truth of this inyan. And then through this process, bo bipnimius, it enters, it comes bipnimius internally, it becomes internalized in klei meichi. It becomes internalized in his brain. Umeir etzloi, and then it is meir etzloi, then it shines. Then, after it goes through the process, then when you say God created the world, it really has a meaning to him. It really shines. It's not just something like superimposed. You know what superimposed means? Superimposed, something that's put on my mind. This is the way I have to think. But it's something that really is made, shines, and illuminates his whole world. So we're having a real hard time understanding this in, don't we?
Does that have to occur sequentially?
Huh?
Does that have to occur sequentially?
Yes. Yes.
And
Right. It has to occur sequentially.
so
Let me see. This Chokhmah Bina V'Das is the same process. Like you take a piece of food in your mouth, you taste it. The taste, we once spoke about this in general class, that the taste is a very important thing. Because this opens the body to accept the food. If it tastes normal, if it tastes something that is good, so the body accepts the food. And if it doesn't taste it, it's something that makes him regurgitate and makes him, that turns him off. He won't be able to accept. Even if you force it, it's not going to accept it. It's not going to give him a healthy health, because the body is going to reject this food. So this is begashmi. This is sort of like the chokhmah, something that, it really makes sense. I see it. Then you have to chew it up. You have to chew it up. That's like bina. You have to chew it up. You have to swallow it, and it has to go through a whole process of digestion. After he's digested, then first he becomes accepted in the bloodstream, and it becomes part of the person. If a person, for one, takes food in his mouth and he tastes it and spits it out, it's not going to give him anything. So that it has to be taken in and digested, and then only then afterwards it first becomes his own mind, his own thing. This is Chokhmah Bina V'Das, essentially.
The Chokhmah Bina Das thing, I understand. It's normal. We relate to it. It's a normal thing. You have experience of something, it becomes a part of you. The martial that started triggering questions that
Well, if you,
I can't say that. I mean, Chokhmah and Bina seems to be the two faculties used in every day. But Das, at least in the secular world, there's no concept of Das. There's no concept. No. Experience is not it, because Das is that it becomes a part of you. You can learn or however much secular subjects you want, but it doesn't become a part of you. It doesn't
That's
become
right.
your reality. It's
That's
just
right.
It's a question, it's an answer, it has an answer, and then you move on to the next thing. And then you have these things like, for instance, the existence that this cup is sitting in front of me. Okay, you could say I can take that into Das because I see it and I can understand it. It's real for me that this cup is here and whatnot. But this entire idea that you take
no, it's not. You're absolutely right.
The idea that you take this abstract concept, Rishis Barlakim, and you turn it into Das, I have absolutely no idea how to go about that. Like, how exactly does one? We explained the concepts about what are the tools you need to be able to, so to speak, to grab it with the koyach of Das in order to put an edge on it so you can start to feel around it. But even that seems to, for me at least right now, it's remained kind of like it's remaining still abstract. Like, how do you put what we just learned into Das? What is the Das of what it is that we just covered? How exactly does one go about this process?
Well, Rabbi, why can't you take in the secular world, why can't this Das thing apply? Like, for instance, when you learn about something and you understand.
No, we discussed this.
Then you go through it.
No. Not, we discussed many times that the union of seichel, that when we talk about seichel, chochmah, bina, v'das, seichel that we are talking about is not the seichel that is not what we call about the secular seichel. Because there, the seichel is simply defining things, arranging things on the outside. That's not seichel. Seichel is what what seichel defines for you, not just arranging things. What is the best way to figure things out? And as you said many times, that even animals have that type of seichel. Animals are capable of arranging things for themselves and finding their way around. That's not the seichel we're talking about. We're talking about the seichel that directs a person in his life, that tells him what is life about. We're talking about the seichel that says to a person, you can't go empty-handed. You can't just waste your days. You can't just eat and sleep and enjoy yourself. There has to be something more meaningful to you. That's seichel. Where does that come from? That doesn't come from mathematics. That comes from inside a person's mind. That type of seichel, for sure, the animal doesn't have. And that's the seichel, because this is a seichel which is essentially originates, so to speak, in the person's mind, originates in the neshama. So when he has this concept, this chokhmah, then he has to connect to this and say, what is it that I conceptualize? Why, like we said, he goes around and he's unhappy about something. He has to then focus in what bothers me. And he comes up with the words and say, this is all meaningless. That's because he focused in on what he sensed.
How does this, like you said, the muscle of the food, where does the digestion take place, or how does it take place? So you have it, you put it in you, how do you absorb it? How does it become part of you?
This is where what we call hasoga. Hasoga means to grasp. When you have you're grasping, you understand the inyonim in detail. That's what digestion is. Digestion is it takes the food and breaks it up into parts, to particles. And only by breaking it up into parts, then it can ultimately seep into your bloodstream and become part of you.
I guess then it's the becoming part of you part that's absent, because even with secular studies also, you can say that in order to understand it, according to the secular definition of understanding, it also needs to be broken up into components. You need to understand the dimension of each one of those so that you can, so to speak, reassemble it into the idea, whether it be a very simple idea, whether it be kind of an abstract concept. But how does it become?
No, but the difference is that there, generally speaking, you are breaking up into components something that consists of components. Like you take the watch apart, so you know how it works, but it consists of components. Here we're talking about something that consists of an idea, which does not consist of components. You break it down in components in order to understand it, in order to apply it. I'm afraid that I went too far into it. What?
Why?
Can there be a going back and forth between?
What?
Can you go back and forth between the das that connects Chachma and Bina, in between that das and the Bina itself, where if you have an idea and then you desire to go to the point of that Indian, right? So then you're working through it within Bina.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can see that there are other key points,
flaws in the way you're
right? So like,
Do again. The das connects to the nakuda,
right?
and then you take it into bina.
Right. So you're
Right.
thinking about the Indian, it's the Kuda, and it's different pratim.
Right.
And within that, you're realizing another key, a key hole, or something that's missing, it's not everything, because it's really also essential to what you're talking about. So once you find that, that's like another idea of das, like connecting into what is that? Is that a new idea? Is that a new?
No. So this happens very often. That when you take a single idea and you break it down in bina, you discover things that you didn't think of before. They're all coming from the same nakuda.
This is in Bina, you said?
Right.
In Bina, you discover things that you didn't realize before? Like when a person realizes, like, Hashgacha Pratis type of thing. Is that what you're talking about? When he realizes, like, wow, that happened because teach me this because I was going to go through this, and like, is that what?
Okay. Let me. Again, I don't want to go into that whole discussion for long, but just want to point out. In the original thought that God creates the world, we just had an idea. God creates the world. But to formulate it in that clear formula, that God creates the world, rejuvenates the world on a constant basis, that's something which you actually discover in Bina. Because that's the only way to translate the Chokhmah into Bina. When you thought of it originally, you didn't think of it in terms of being constant. All you thought about is, there is no world except for the fact that God creates it. That's why you're sure that God creates it. Then when you start defining that nakuda, that idea, you say, oh, you know something? It gets created all the time.
Why is it the only way?
It is the only way. Take it from me.
I believe also that God creates the world every second.
No.
I don't know why that's the only way.
Okay, that I'm saying, I can't go into that. I'm explaining to you. This is where the discovery is.
So in Bina then is where you're going to really discover the true nakuda.
What?
So then in Bina is when you're going to discover the true nakuda of what occurred to you in Chachma, right?
No, the Bina you'll discover the way that this Chokhmah can be translated at the Bina level. In Chokhmah you say there is no world but for the fact that God creates it. So then when you translate it, but there is a world. But there is a world. That means that God creates constantly. So you translate the Chokhmah in Bina in this way.
And then within the point of Chachma, this idea, which now you're just discovering, it already existed, but now it's being translated, so to speak. It's
Right.
being drawn out, and you can see the full.
How it translates on the Bina level.
So where does one come to the nakuda?
I'm sorry?
Where does one come to the nakuda? Where does a person come to the nakuda of an
To the nakuda? The nakuda is when the nakuda is a different process completely. Nakuda is to search out and see The Nakuda is when you search out to see what is the reality that you recognize. The Chochmah effectively, okay. How does one come to the Nakuda to recognize that to live without a purpose is meaningless? How does one get to that? It strikes him. He sees he's unhappy. And he thinks, what bothers me? And then he thinks about it and says, hey, this whole thing is meaningless. What is my effort? What am I putting my effort in? Just to give you an example. When he recognizes the truth of how he internally really sees the reality.
How does a person come to that realization?
He comes to that realization because his neshama is pushing it.
Something higher than his seichel.
That's right.
And then the seichel is the tool to reach that point.
The seichel is, that's right, to identify it.
The neshama, so to speak, providing the
Creating the Nakuda, right. Neshama is the truth behind that Nakuda. Like we said before, what is the difference between a human being and an animal? Is there a difference? Everybody responds, of course there's a difference. How do you know? You think for a second, and you know. Then what is the difference? What is it that you know in this? What did you identify? That you have to apply yourself and think about it.
So when you say you just know, where does that fall in the picture? I just know.
I just know. If you say I just know and you don't really know, that's nothing. If you say and I know because I have it in my seichel, that's chokhmah. That's chokhmah, that level. I sense it. Now you have to concentrate and focusing on that chokhmah and say, what is it that made me say that? What do I see? Shazam, is that a better motion?
I don't get more confused.
Right. Eventually we'll untangle it. Huh? When? Dry process.
Huh?
Don't worry about it. We'll untangle it. So what do you guys say? This is a little difficult, or should we continue with this, Maimon, or should we, this is tough. Huh?
I'd like to continue. I think it's good.
It's real tough stuff.
My second
Yes.
I
What
like
about?
it, but I need to ask questions. I need to.
You ask questions about the muscle.
No, I was off the muscle already.
Okay, you sure you
I
can
have
ask
other
questions?
questions. I don't want to ask them.
You don't want to ask anymore?
I do, but I'd like it. Because I feel like I understand it.
You know, you missed several classes. You know
I
that?
understand. Something I relate to.
What?
I think it's something I relate to. I think I'll be through such a process.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll speak to you separately. Okay? How about the others? What do you think? You want to pursue it? You want to pursue it, Mayor? It's not becoming any easier. Huh?
I'm talking out of it.
What else do? You're out of it. What do you say, David?
I've been out of it, but I'm coming back. Like I don't know. I started to get it today, and I really like it actually. So I hope to continue.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. Who do you chazan with? Who do you review? By yourself. That answers it.
No, I didn't tell if it's your problem. It's my problem.
I'm not saying it's my. I'm not saying it's any of your problem. I'm not saying it's your problem. It's my problem. That's not the point. I'm saying if you're doing by yourself, so then if you can't learn this thing, then it's so. Can I pair you up with somebody that you should see, and then you'll come back and see whether we can pursue this stuff. Huh? Yeah, Yosef, who do you review with? Huh? I'm sorry? Nobody? Who do you review with? You?
I was with him and his brother, but his brother left. It's been like a little while since. He learns by himself now.
Tell you what, I'll let you guys, you're not children, try to review, find your partners, try to review, and tell me on Monday whether we can pursue it or not.
Can I talk to you about this? Like
Yeah.
between them?
Yeah. Because to the other one, that now that's challenging. And this is,
Well, challenging is good. There's nothing wrong with
I
challenging.
understand, but not something which is beyond what we're up to. Everything has its levels.
I'm only confused because I can't get at what I'm thinking.
I'll talk.
I feel like I understand what you're saying. Like I think I relate to this. I need to be able to talk about it, but we don't really have that opportunity.
Oh, really?
We can, but there's a limit to how much we can talk
No,
about.
no. Privately, I can talk to you privately. All right, so Mitzvah Monday will make a decision. Because right, the next minor Matsuzu is much.
What is the next
Easier.
mimer and what's
The next mimer is Avoida and Golus and Gula, Golus Mitzrayim. Avoida is the Kemaim. This is much more difficult.
Seems like a way done, no? Hell of a way.
Okay?
What do you think we could talk about? We still need to talk about something else.
Today, I cannot stay because I have a wedding to have to mostly on time. You want to start off the recorder?